Hello, everybody. My name's Milan Starcic. Welcome to Freedom Rising, a podcast dedicated to empowering individuals on the journey to personal growth, lasting serenity, and freedom from addiction. Tune in and join the movement. Your journey to freedom starts here. We neither represent, promote, or demote any 12-step program or organization. We are merely souls on the path of recovery with the desire to expand our lives and experiences and share them with you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 49th Recovery Freedom Rising podcast. I'm Milan Starcic with co-host Shannon B. Today's topic is step 4. Shannon, would you please read this step for us and share with us what this means to you?
Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Ooh, searching and
Yes.
fearless, hey? Yeah, so step 4 to me is really just a fact-finding and fact-facing mission of our lives, right? We break it down into resentments, fears, and our harms done, right? And this is really where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, for me. Like in the literature, it says after step 3, we immediately launched into a course of vigorous action, right? Which would be step 4. So that's coming and facing things that we've been carrying around for a long time that are no longer going to serve us in this new life and recovery. So that's really what it is in a nutshell. I call it like the spring cleaning of our lives.
I love that. I've been going to these in-person meetings down here, and I've heard two really old timers down here say this, that if you don't if you don't finish your step 4, you're going to drink your step 5. And
Yep.
I was like, man, like how many people I know who've gotten to step 4, not got it done, and went back out. And for me, step 4 was one of the most profound processes of my entire life. Like there's a lot to be said about taking the tools of the steps and, at least for me, the way that they showed me in options and also to the way that I did them with my sponsor once I got out. But I didn't have those tools to, or maybe didn't have the tools, or the humility, or the willingness to actually look at myself honestly before that. Like there was a lot of stuff I had wrapped in delusion so far that my part really wasn't apparent. You know, like
Huge.
for,
We
for
never get that far, right? We get as far as what did the other person do, but we don't get to
mm,
as far as what was our part and maybe causing that.
mm. And I always say this step to me is the moral inventory that made me fear less, that I've always been searching for. So, it's like in my whole life, I wanted relief from things like shame and guilt and anxiety. And it was the tools of this step that were like the key that kind of started opening that door to freedom. And, I watched people working very hard on this when I got to options. And I remember there was so many like people that were really hating and dreading it. But for myself, it was like, I'm like, what? I can just like discover all this shit about myself using this method to break it down. Like to be shown this tool to me was like, I've been walking on glass for decades, and now you give me a pair of work boots. And I'm just like, oh shit, look at me go. Like I felt for myself, it was the turning point to a freedom like that of the causes for a lot of my addictive behavior, you know? And so when I call it the moral inventory that made me fearless, that I was always searching for, was doing this, was that the case for you? And if so, how, Shannon?
Huge. I like that. If you don't thoroughly do a step 4, you're going to drink your step 5. Like there's just so much truth to that. And, I've seen it over the years, right? Sponsees get to the step 4, they didn't really want to do the work. And then before you know it, they're back out again, right? And when I know that this is such a crucial step in order to seek the solution. And in order to live in recovery, for me, it's a non-negotiable, right? The freedom that I got out of that was huge. I didn't like, I know that it can seem daunting, right? Suddenly we have to face our past. But here's the thing, everything's already been done. You know what I mean? We're just having a shift in perspective towards it. Resentment is the only thing where we're gonna keep replaying, 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 expecting a different result from something that's already happened. And if you're anything like me, I over catastrophized the small things and I undermined the big things, right? Because I didn't want to face a lot of stuff. There was pain wrapped around that, right? I didn't believe I had any fear when I came in this program the first time. I thought I was fearless, go with the flow, wild child, all of that. But really, it was just a matter of being, immature, um, really a lunatic in a lot of ways, you know what I mean? And not really wanting to take a look at things that were affecting me, right? I was always suppressing stuff. So in step 4, I can get that all out. I'm not even in 5 yet. It's really just I'm writing it down on a paper. Here's what I'm resentful at. The reason being, right? And how can I shift that to see my part in it? It's really simple. And I don't wanna keep living in a space that I need to numb out pain or I need to numb anything out as it comes up, right? Once it's free, I can move out of it. I don't want that stuff living in my head, renting space rent free, truly. And the fears, I was riddled with fear. I just couldn't see it.
Yeah, it's funny what we think, our reaction is, and then when we dig deeper to actually see that the fear and the shortcoming that is just the manifestation of that fear. One of the speaker tapes I listened to, the guy was like, the real problem is a disconnection with our higher power, and the problem, that he sees is that it, we're being robbed from living in the present moment. And that robbery of from us being in the present moment has us kind of like living two lives simultaneously. So our shame and guilt, right? Like our shame and guilt that's uncovered with doing this inventory keeps us living in the past, and our anxiety about things for the future, like that fear of the future things, keep us from living presently as well, because we're in the future and we're not. And so we're like pulled in these two directions, and there's so little of us left right now, that how can we actually be living in a unity and an integrity of this moment when we're not even being honest with ourselves about where our mind's at?
I never lived in the present when I was drinking, except for while I was drinking. That was the
Mm,
only time I
yeah.
was in the present. Everything else was, harboring feelings or emotions from something that's already happened or riddled with anxiety of what was to come, right? Like, it was never just focusing on and there was no gratitude, right? When you do the work in this step 4, you see so much gratitude come, right? Like, I was overwhelmed with that. And frankly, it's just not healthy for us, period,
Mm-hmm.
to stay in the emotions that are attached to some of these resentments. It says in our literature that, anger is a dubious luxury, right? That we just do not have. And when I first read that, it really stood out to me, and I remember that all the time when I start to perhaps get into, being upset with something, and it's very rare that I feel that these days. But I remind myself that I can't afford to stay angry. I can't afford to stay in negative emotions because my mind will catastrophize. It'll manifest that, right? Hugely into a negative headspace. And anything that can lead me onto a track to potentially back to a drink, I'm nipping that in the butt right away and I'm getting off that. I need that true freedom. And that comes from facing the wreckage of our past. It says that, right? It's a fact-finding, fact-facing inventory, moral inventory. It's a beautiful thing, you know? I think that there's more people that could benefit from doing something like that. It doesn't just need to be, limited to us alcoholics.
Awesome. And so, do you have a question for me?
Yeah, so this is being your first real kick at the can, right? And I'm just so proud of you that you've been able to stay the course, and that you found such joy and peace and comfort in this new life living in the solution. When you first were told about your step four in treatment and given the instructions on how to do it, what was your initial feeling, like your gut reaction?
Um, so first of all, they they were like, I think they said pick four or six or something. So I think
Yeah.
I picked 21.
Hmm.
And in my mind, I was like, oh man, have I got resentments? And I was like, okay, line up to the left of everybody who's going to have to line up and apologize to me when I leave treatment because I'm like, this is like, I was like ready. I'm like, man, like, I was like, I'm going to have this so well written that they're going to have no choice but to line up and apologize to Milan. And it was like, I literally thought that it was like I was going to have this like extreme complicated dissection of what they owed me an apology for. And it was like so funny because like as I'm getting into it and I'm like did the first one, I'm like, oh, I'm like, I can see where this is going. And and it turned out from like the apology lineup to the left to like the I'm sorry lineup to the right, single file line, no butting. And it was like 95% my fault. So when like I had really had no idea where it was going. Like, like not a single clue where it was going. I feel like I was super naive, but it's okay because like it didn't matter. And then once I saw that there was some people just slightly ahead of me doing theirs, and they were really not having a good time looking at themselves and it was the opposite for me. Like I was not enjoying I was not enjoying seeing my defects. Let's make that clear. But I was enjoying having these tools and the process. Like I think my first step forward was 120 pages. Like I was absolutely bananas. But the thing was is that I was like when they say searching and fearless, right? Like if I'm not digging deep, how is that searching? And if I'm not going to the outer reaches of what's causing me pain, how is that fearless? You know? So it was like I was there to work. Like I went into debt to go to options, that I'm still not recovered from. And for myself, it was like I wanted to get something from it. And the only way to get something from it, I saw immediately the first day I got there was for me to be working hard. And to mamby-pamby dance around 500 excuses of why I can't complete my step forward, that just wasn't happening for me, you know? So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Now you've got to answer that question.
Sure. Well, I've done a few over the years,
Yeah, but I want to hear about your first one.
I know. That's what I'm just thinking. I was like, it's so impactful to me that I can remember the exact place where I was, how I responded, everything. So my first time coming in, my step four was laid out to me by my sponsor at the time, very briefly. And to me, it sounded like I was going to have to just drudge up the past and all this painful stuff. And when I heard that, I stood up from where I was. I said, "Thank you. I appreciate your time, but I see no reason how this is gonna serve me, to go back to painful things and to bring up stuff that I've let go, right? I don't wanna live in that past anymore, so I'm not gonna bring it up." And I left, and I was like, "That's it.
Oh,
I'm done. I'm not doing it," right?
now this was with a sponsor or you were at a treatment center and you fled?
No sponsor. My first time in the
Okay.
program, I didn't go to treatment,
Okay.
and
Okay.
I said, "No, thanks, like, I'm out," right? And I
And you
remember
drank your step five, right?
there wasn't even a pen to paper before I was drinking again, because that was all I needed. My disease,
Mhm.
that was all it needed to tell me, "This isn't for you." And I remember getting
See,
on the phone with somebody who I knew would co-sign that and saying, "This makes no sense. They want me digging up old past, old hurts, old pain, and they want me to do it without the crutch of alcohol. This is crazy. There's no way I'm doing it, right? I'd have these little sayings in my head, like what defines you doesn't defy you, and that was about the depth of my healing journey with that. But I didn't really understand, to my own defense, I didn't understand what the step 4 was, what the point of it was, how I was gonna go through each thing. So, when I actually did my first one, that's when it made sense, you know?
Mhm.
But I am glad that I had that experience because it helps me with sponsees that are a bit more intolerant than wanting to do it or that really
Mhm.
wanna drag their feet, right? And I
Yep.
go back and forth sometimes between I don't wanna put too much in the past, I'd give them, like, a tight timeline and be like, "You need to get this done, pen to paper, let's go."
Mhm.
Now, I feel it out a little bit depending on the sponsee because there may be other things, going on outside of the scope of addiction, and I don't wanna push anyone too quickly either, right? Like, "Hey, you gotta do this now," if maybe they're dealing with, some other disorders as well, but I don't let anybody sit in it. Because to sit in it is to drink in it.
That's right. I agree. I think that
The longer our mind gets to, like, push something out or sit in the sick part,
mm,
need the solution. Like, as
that's
alcoholics,
right.
it's immediate, right? You're feeling irritable, discontented, upset, any of those things, we need immediate relief of a drink, right? So when we're looking at things that are painful and have trauma attached to them or anger, you name it, right? Circumstantial, people, all of it. And we get that out, we are gonna need a solution immediately because that will start to get the hamster wheel going, and then we're gonna be like, "I can't," not because we don't have any tools, right? To face anything head on. So now we do. So getting them to, that working step with me in 5 is crucial.
I find if you don't do the work, nothing changes. So if nothing changes and you used to, not be able to say to yourself that I'm not drinking today, and then you would drink. Well, if you haven't done any work, what's going to change? You know? And it the work is the difference for me between going back to that life and being here. Like
Stagnant, like
I never had days
stagnant,
without shame, without guilt, and
without
that's because
remorse,
of
right?
doing this. Yeah. Okay, so I've got a question for you here, Shannon B. Are you ready?
Oh,
Okay. Our instincts can exceed their proper function. So step 4 is an effort to discover our liabilities. Basic problem of extremes in instinctive drives. This certainly was the case in addiction. Was this the case for you that you discovered through your work in this step?
no, 100%. Our own natural, desires, right? That everyone has, the need for love, feeling safe, right? Being able to, show up as ourselves, being accepted, all of that, right? That's all normal and that's all great, but we'll take far more than our fair share of it. You know what I mean? Like, the entitlement that comes around that too is huge, right? And it's knocking down a lot of that ego. So yes, its instincts ran wild. Um, when I looked at really my part in this. And another thing I want to mention to those listening is we're not doing this to chastise ourselves. You know what I mean? Or to be crawling before anybody. That's not what it's about. It's about no longer allowing something to have power over us that doesn't
Mm,
serve us. Right? So when I
mhm,
took a look, if I can't look at my part in something, then I'm continuously giving someone else or something control. And I don't wanna live at the mercy of that anymore. So when I looked at my step 4, my part in it with the help of my sponsor and me seeing that was wild, and I needed her to say to me, "You're not the only woman in history to have ever done that. You're not the only woman to have ever endured that, like give your head a shake here. Let's get out of the victim mode, and let's get out
Hmm.
of the shame spiral that I was in too. Because it's either I have nothing, it's all your fault or it's all my fault, right? And
Hmm.
I need to, remedy this as quickly as possible. Sometimes we got to sit in the shit for a bit, right? So that we can see, hey, this is where I showed up wrong. This is where I handled this incorrectly. Let's course correct that into the future. Because when I'm going out and I'm changing my life, right? It's not a manipulation tactic. I really do want to do things differently. And I can't do that until I fully understand where I've gone wrong, you know? And those instincts ran wild, like the way that we lived, right? Like I always say, like it was just so crazy. Like I only got to the part where you wronged me. I didn't get to the part where I may have set that ball rolling, right? And I remember sitting in a treatment center, my first one, and I was I was fired up, I had a resentment to an ex of mine, and I said, "I don't think you quite understand what he said to me." And my counselor kept looking at me and saying, "Yeah, I hear you, but what did you say before that?" And I couldn't believe that she wasn't just stopping at the information I had delivered, right? Like,
You're not taking my side.
oh, livid, livid, livid. I can tell you stories that we'll get into them as we get into further steps of just aha moments and, lunatic moments where it took me a while for the light bulb to go off. But that's as far as I got, right? And I'm sure you've done this, but I used to drink at people, right? We use a man, for example, because women, we come in with some resentments around men as men have resentments around women. And it's like, if a guy failed me or I had plans or something and like, they canceled or, things just didn't go to plan, right? And that relationship, my immediate, remedy was I'm going out and getting loaded and I'm going to show him, right? I'm
Yeah.
going to the wall tonight and that's going to show him. Drinking the poison, expecting somebody else to die. That's crazy. I'm gonna go destroy myself to prove a point to you, to get back at you, right? And that's all it was. I harbored resentments against people for things that I never even gave them room to be of service to me, right? And I didn't think I had a lot of them until I wrote them down. And they were resentments that was still always perched in the back of my mind, especially with family too, right? And then the minute, you know, we wouldn't see eye to eye, what comes flooding back? Everything they've done to me. And now I'm justified in my anger.
I love that. Oh, I love when you get fired up, Shannon. It's so awesome.
This is this and step 10 really are
Yeah.
the keys to the kingdom for me personally, right? Because if I don't know how to do a 4, I'm not going to know how to do a 10. And today I refuse to stay in any sort of resentment or to live in any sort of fear. So
Mhm.
shall we move on to the next question now that
Well, I've got to answer this question.
I know I was going to say, are you going to answer? My next one
Yeah,
was going
yeah.
to be, you're going to answer
Yeah,
this.
yeah, I'm going to answer this. So, um, I was taking it too far, Tony. Like when I read this in the 12 steps and
I'm
12
sorry to interrupt, but
traditions,
I cannot wait to drop that nugget the next time I share at a 12 and 12 meeting that I was what I'm gonna say was take it too far, Tina. This is
there we
I
go.
love it. I love it.
Like I was the master of take it too far, Tony. And what it did for me was it was like my super high tolerance to use. What that did was that just like my tolerance to substances made me do more because it was like I wanted a buzz just like anybody else, but it took a super amount. And so it's like I would what I learned in my first step 4 was that I was taking my anger too far. Why? So I could drink at you, as Shannon would say, or use at you. It would be like my fuck you. if somebody told me about something that was sad in their life, I would make it like nailing me to the cross, and like I would be like carrying their pain. Why? So I could go use. Like, and then it was like, oh man, Shannon's got a birthday, John's got a birthday, Steven's got a birthday. I could find every birthday, every anniversary, anything, and that was my reason to go use again. Like it was like I had these delusional things that I thought I was living this extremely hard life, extremely hard life. And so I had all these reasons to remain in addiction and to be using. And you know, what I learned inside the step work was I am the prince of the pity party. Like I can throw a pity party, Shannon, that you and all your friends, you would pay money to come to my pity party because we can all just settle so much in our own shit. Guess what we got to do? Drink or use as a celebration of our pity. Like it was so removing from the present moment, all of it. Like there was nothing of me left to be here today, to have any unity inside my soul. Like there was no chance I had any space for conscious contact because I was having a pity party about the past, or I was catastrophizing about the future, and there was nothing left here at all. Like taking it too far, Tony took it all away. Took every scrap of present moment and was like, I can be that. Let's see, this half of the present goes to the past, and this half goes to the future, and then this half goes to stuff that never's going to exist. You know, like, and that's where I was trapping myself, and and for the longest time, it was just like I had zero acceptance, zero acceptance. And that lack of acceptance kept me trapped away from the present moment. There we go. And now it's Shannon's question.
That's beautiful. I love the way that you put that. Honestly, it's like you just read, my thoughts, right, around that. And it's so true. I always say that I drank when it was my birthday, when it was your birthday, when it was your daughter's birthday. You know what I mean? And also when it was Tuesday at 2. Like there did not need to be a reason, but you gave me one and that justified it times 1,000. You know what I mean? Um, and also too, the ability to really throw caution to the wind during times where you've got something really important that you need to commit to, right? Like it's ludicrous when I think about it, right? It's like that doesn't even come into play. And living in such deep denial. Oh, that's tomorrow. I'll be fine tomorrow, right? Like it's just ludicrous to think like when I should be resting, looking after myself, making sure I'm on for the next day, that I'm prepared, right? And it's not even like it's not the true authentic me. It's that disease that says tells me, don't worry about it. Go have some drinks. It's all gonna be okay. Like that voice that just keeps running us straight into a wall over and over again, right? And it's like we know it for a split second, but then we are deceived. And yeah, I thought I was such a great friend, my girlfriends were going through it. You had a problem with your man, you had a bad day at work, you had a fight with your family. No problem. Let me be there for you. I.e., another excuse for me to drink, by playing the martyr, like I'm here to help you, right? I'll take one for the team and, be that comforting friend when maybe they didn't even want to drink, right? But I didn't give them an option for there to be anything else. Like that was the remedy for everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just so crazy when you look back at it, right? Because I never healed from anything that way. All I did was postpone, right? That
Hmm.
grief. And that's all my life was for 18 years of just postponing things I didn't want to deal with, right? With the crutch of alcohol. And today I don't have to postpone anything. I am prepared to deal with it in the present.
Hmm.
So,
Nice.
enough about resentments. I'm gonna switch gears a little bit and get into the fears with you. Um,
Okay.
so I mentioned to you earlier myself that I thought I was fearless, right?
Hmm.
There was like a point where I thought I should get a tattoo that actually said fearless. Gosh, I'm glad I never got that because I would have had to cross out the less and put full, fearful. Because I was so riddled with fear. When it came down to that, I really had to smash my ego. I had to be able to say, okay, it doesn't make me weak or less than to actually have fears around things in my life. And once I let that go and I was able to write, I had so many fears, I couldn't believe it. And when I work with my sponsees, the first thing I do is tell them that we need to look at what the opposite of fear is, and that is faith, right? And how do we start practicing that faith? It's to look at our fears and show up in those situations, practicing the opposite. So that's how I work. I teach on the fear part of it. When it came for you doing your fear inventory, what was that
Mm.
experience like for you?
Well, so, you know, my daughter has experienced anxiety through high school, and there was a point where I remember her saying to me, "Oh, Dad, like you're not afraid of anything," and this was still during my addiction, and I said, "No, I'm afraid of everything. I just don't let fear rule my life." And I really believed that. Um, and I do face a lot of fears, but the thing that I learned with this step was that I can put a little pretty bow on certain fears, put them in this little box, and it turn it into a resentment. Like I can prepackage fears so that they actually allow me to do things that are immoral, that are dishonest, that are unloving, uncompassionate, intolerant, and I can still think I'm a good guy because I'm not even being honest with myself in those experiences. And that was something that, this step really unpacked for me was how delusional I was about where my actions were coming from. And I don't think without these tools, I would be any further ahead than I was for 51 years of my life, sitting inside these lies. And even now with the tools, sometimes I have to really unpack something that's happening and be like, that's not what you're thinking that is, Milan. And it's still there, and it's going to be, like I, turning around 51 years of mental direction and thinking that you're right inside that, and thinking that you're smart, you know, like that the whole self-centered thing of like having confidence in what you thought you knew is one of the hardest things to undo on a daily basis. Because it's like, no, that's not right. Nope, that's not right. No, that's not right. And it's like that can be really fatiguing on a day that, you're not in the right frame of mind. You're not centered. You didn't get the right rest. You're eating shitty food. You didn't exercise. There's a whole bunch of things where when I'm not in alignment, I don't want to do the work in that moment that it takes to be the new Milan, you know, if that makes any sense.
It
Yeah.
sure does. Thanks for the way that you explained it. And it's true, right? Like turning fears into resentment. We're all guilty of it, right? We've all done it, but you know, there's different types of fears, right? And circumstantial, there's deep rooted, right? And then there's the fears based on things that haven't even happened, right? Like those unrealistic fears. And I explain those too to my sponsees when I'm working with them is like, okay, this fear is stemming from something, right? You've seen this come to fruition, either for others or for yourself in some ways. And that can often be attached to a resentment too, right? And to things that have been out of their control, right? We've had trauma, stuff like that. And then we have the circumstantial fears that come up based on certain situations. And then those, completely irrational fears where, I'm fearful of something that hasn't even happened and there aren't even any, plans in place that could lead to that being. And I think understanding too where these fears come from and that it's okay, we're allowed to feel fear, right? But when we start to stay in it and use it as ammunition to drink or use, that's where it's wrong. And
Nice.
I don't wanna be controlled by that anymore, right? I wanna practice the opposite of that and truly have faith in my higher power, and that I'll have, the tools to handle everything that um, life deals me, right? And if I don't, that I've got the protection of my higher power there, and that's very, comforting.
I love that. Okay, you ready for another question?
Fire it up.
Okay. Once we have a complete willingness to take inventory and exert ourselves to do the job thoroughly, a wonderful light falls upon this foggy scene. As we persist, a brand new kind of confidence is born, and a sense of relief at finally facing ourselves is indescribable. Would you attempt to share the indescribable experience of this step for you on that relief?
Mhm. Yeah, so that came for me more so out of my 5, right? Hear, like, these aha moment that people experience, sometimes there's a lot of pain around that too, and, a step 4 that I did in treatment, did I feel suddenly like the weight of the world was lifted off me after? Eventually, but, I did feel some sadness and some pain around it because it really is looking at things that may have happened out of your control, right? That you're carrying those resentments towards. So there's pain and there's a process and all of it. But truly, the freedom that I felt that I no longer had to live with that, having that control and, like, those shackles over me was so incredible. And to see too that I had the power to think differently, to be able to let things go, to no longer allow that to have such a chokehold on me, that was beautiful, because I didn't know that before, right? I thought that if I just suppressed it or I forgot about it, it would go away, but then it would come back, and I thought that I had no control over that. But except for that to drink it away, right? But when I can look at my part and I can see how, you know, it's a I've heard this mentioned before. I heard this mentioned before by somebody in the program, and I got so much out of it that it, always reminds me when I talk about step 4 is there are things that we are victim to. But when we allow that to justify our decisions moving forward, that's when we become a volunteer. And that was the case for me, right? If you had gone through what I went through, you would be like me too. You would drink too, right? And all it is just the ammunition and the excuse I need to continue to keep harming myself and harming those around me. I don't want to live like that anymore, right? Everybody's had their own hardships. People have been dealt a tough hand, right? Mine's no worse or no better than somebody else's, right? It's just life on life's terms. But when I can face those things and I can see, "Okay, you know what? Yeah, that did happen, and that really sucked." But what I did next to perpetuate that and to put that onto somebody else wasn't okay. Being accountable is a non-negotiable for me today. I have to live that way, right? I have to immediately see my part in things so that I can change how I show up, so that I can right wrongs if I've caused them, so I can let things go, right? Like where I got to keep going that way because if it starts suddenly being all your fault, how long until my disease tells me I'm justified to drink at you again? Not a chance. I'm not letting that happen, right? One day at a time. So, yes, there was so much freedom in that, so much like, okay, I don't have to carry this anymore. Guess what? It's not going to run my mind anymore. I'm not going to allow this to fuel, self harm anymore. And it's beautiful. I love to be able to see my part because that's all I can control. I can control how I show up and how I receive things and how I react. I can't control what you say or do. And frankly, I don't want to because I'm trying to find peace in every single situation, acceptance, serenity, right? There could be chaos going on all around me, but, I don't have to be a part of it, let alone the ringleader. And fours allowed me to be able to live a different way in life.
Once the light was put onto my part using the tools of this step, I could never unsee the room. You know, like I'm not sure if I mentioned on ones with us before, but I feel like gaining knowledge is like this. It's like we get to peek in a window, and then eventually we get the key to the door. Then eventually we can open the door, and then we can actually live inside the room. But until you peek in that window, that room could look like anything, and you have no clue what the room is like. It could be anything like you visualize or completely opposite you visualize all the time. But once you get that little peek, you can't unsee it. And there was no way once I saw my part in all these things that I could ever act without the knowledge of what I was doing in those situations. Like one of my friends, Scotty N, who comes on the podcast, he said, he's like, step work, you know, the program ruined my using because
100%.
it's like it's just like like I can no longer pretend that using at you isn't just me using at you. I can no longer pretend that a pity party isn't a pity party. And so, like, if you're ever throwing a pity party, I'm not even RSVPing everybody out there. Like, I'm not showing up because I don't want you to come to mine. You know, like it's just not where I want to live in my life. And, you know, and also even on the false celebratory things, like I'm just not pretending. I'm not pretending I'm happy and I'm not pretending I'm sad. I'm not pretending I'm angry. You know, I am still falling into the trap of being angrier than I want at certain moments. But
Mhm.
that's a job of chipping away at a mountain of lack of control, Like first of all, obviously, in my addictive behavior, I was not specializing in any self-control. Like I was specializing in sensationalization,
And
which
being out of control, that was where that's where I
yeah,
was.
yeah, exactly. And so I feel like I agree with you. My big relief was in step five. And even though I had written it down, even though I saw all the facts, I was I was shown an amount of liberation. But for whatever reason, and there's a reason why they get you to read it to another person. Like these steps are laid out in a genius reason, and there some magic happened. But I'm not going to get too far into that because I want to save that for next week. But I do think that step four showed me my life in a way that I could never unsee.
It's like
Like
once the blinders come off, right? Like,
yeah,
when that denial's stripped away, then we have no choice but to take a look at things, and you can't unsee it anymore, and I'm grateful for that, right? I always say, like, going back out when you already understand the depths of your disease and that it's never gonna be different is really tough because you've got a brain full of the program and a body full of the substance, and they just don't harmonize, you know what I mean? And
mhm.
it's hard. It's so much harder to keep chasing away what you already know, right? Like, the knowledge is there, and, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I'm glad that, I no longer have to have that as an option, right? Not that it ever really was, but, my mind was playing tricks on me, telling me that it was. And being able to have some control over, how I allow things to affect me is amazing. Because if I keep handing that over by allowing this resentment or this person that I'm resentful at to rent space in my head, so to speak, then I'm giving them the ability to tell me whether or not I can get over it, because immediately it's like I'm resentful at this person. Well, anytime I see them or I think about them or I interact with them and that triggers and fires it up again, guess what? Now I'm drinking at them again. And now they have even more control over me, right? And I'm not going to let anyone or anything ever derail me again, as long as I keep doing what I need to do each day. And I'm committed to that.
I love that. You've got
This
another question for me, Shannon?
Yeah, this has been a deep, discussion on 4, and I love every minute of it. So, when you got into your harm's done part of this, right? And you had to take a look at, we'll say sex conduct, your relationship patterns, right? Harms that you've caused to other people, whether that be friendship, business, you know, personal, right? How did you find that part of things when we realized that we're actually people who, invoke jealousy in people, suspicion, um, come and go as we pleased, discard people, right, to our benefit, and don't really stick around to see the harm that is done. How did you find having to take a look at that part of yourself?
It was like that slightly queasy feeling when like when you're caught in a lie.
Mhm.
Like when you're having a conversation with someone and they just confront you on something you know you lied to them about, and you're like, oh, and you feel like sick for a second. Except that was me to myself over and over and over. Like there was so much tumultuousness during the, I, I think it was, maybe 6 days or something like that. I think it was 6 days that I worked on it, the first time. And it was a lot of up and downs. And it really, temporarily, it took me to an all-time low of Milan's concept of Milan. Looking inside, I was like, man, was there anything nice that I did? And then being doing it in the treatment center, like no phones and no communication. It, it's good because you get to delve deep inside yourself, but it's bad because you don't have a friend to call and say, "Hey, was I really a jerk all the time?" So it's just like when I take me on a crash course with me, I can be really, really hard on me. And like honestly, I would say that right before the step five was an all-time low opinion of Milan in the history of Milan kind. Yeah. And what about you, Shannon?
Nauseating,
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Took me a minute to kind of understand, I guess, the depth of damage I may have caused, because I knew what lied ahead in the steps. There was part of me that wanted to not take a look at some of them because the amends
Mm.
that I knew that I'd have to make, um, I felt fear around, and also just that queasiness. How do I put this? I'll just put it bluntly because that's how we handle everything on this podcast.
Yeah.
My ego, my way of viewing, we'll say casual relationships I had had, meaning that I maybe dated the person briefly or, we were part of each other's lives briefly. I never looked at the fact that they may have had feelings or that they did. I looked at it like, I've done you a favor. You're lucky to have even
Yeah.
been in my presence, let alone had any sort of romantic interaction with me or romantic relationship, right? That's about as far as I got. And 2, when it came to regrets I'd had because, you don't live blackout drunk the way that I did and don't and not have some, you know? Those ones made me a bit more queasy, didn't necessarily wanna look at some of that stuff, but, I knew that I had to. Also, if someone else had hurt me, that's as far as it got, you know? I had every right to be resentful at them and forget about the harms I may have caused because to me, the harm they caused me far outweighed anything that I may have done in that situation. The eye for an eye mentality, I lived by that. I don't anymore, right? So having to look at that, yeah, it was tough, you know? Also, I didn't have any footprint or game not even game plan, but, like, nobody handed me, a guide or here's the kit on how to have a healthy relationship. I didn't know. I don't know what I don't know, right? And I'm not using that as a crutch or an excuse for, some of my behaviors, but I really didn't. So, what I thought was acceptable or was okay isn't. And I was so addicted to the toxicity of relationships. I didn't understand what actual healthy loved looked like, right? I didn't have any of those tools. So how I showed up in relationships with other people was, impaired emotionally, um, as well as impaired physically with the alcohol too. But I didn't have any solid good examples of how I was supposed to be, right? I was winging it and I was going by however someone else was treating me was pretty much how I'd be treating them, you know? Um, yeah, and today I'm like, "Ugh."
Like I've learned in some couples counseling since being in treatment, like most of us are just replaying what we saw adults do, right? And we don't have that manual of what a healthy relationship looks like. And we don't even have a clue where to start, you know? So, like, even, okay, imagine you never got fucked up, right? Imagine you never, and you approach this with the clearest mind possible, and you watched two parents treating each other like shit. You've now learned, well, the right thing to do in a relationship is to treat the other person like shit because that was your example to go from. And you're like, well,
Mhm.
oh, okay, maybe, maybe I'm not going to hit my partner, but, yelling's okay. Like, and now, like, you think you've upgraded the relationship compared to what you saw and and
Absolutely.
and, and you're still a verbal abuser like like there's so much about relationships like anybody who thinks relationships aren't work. You know what I call them? Single, because they have no fucking clue. like, like it's the reality is that they're work, and if you're not willing to work on it, then you're either lying in a really crappy one or you're single. Like that's it, you know.
That is it, and I don't care how much
Yeah.
I do individually, how much work my partner does individually, right? There we are
Mhm.
still working at it, you know?
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
right. You're 100% right, and like I say, I don't wanna brag, but I don't need to be 3 sheets to the wind to send that text message and, get shit popping off, right? I don't
Yeah.
need to be drunk to be a toxic person in a relationship, to engage in
Yeah.
toxic behaviors, I'm far removed from where I was, but I've done a lot of work over the years in my recovery on relationships, you know, on men, right? On healing trauma, on, looking at things differently than, how I was raised and what I grew up in. And like, we could have a whole podcast on, healthy relationships versus
Maybe we will.
unhealthy and what that looks like in sobriety too, because it's challenging, right? It's not like Milan, you put the substance down, I put the drink down, and everybody showed up and behaved exactly how as we wanted them to be, right? And we were just, never rattled or we didn't have character defects or we weren't human at the end of the day. It doesn't work that way, right? But I can't hold on to those toxic patterns and expect to stay sober in relationships today, right? That's why really you don't have a lot of business being in one in early recovery because it's two sick people, right? Like two broken doesn't make a fixed. So it's like go do the work on yourself, get yourself healthy. Also, when I did my 5, and more work with, my sponsor around that, what I was looking for in a relationship changed. My sane, sound sex ideal, and for those that don't really know what we're talking about, it's what I want to attract in a partner, in a healthy partner, and what I want to have as a healthy partner, right? Because before, in a
Mhm.
lot of cases, my qualifications for a guy, well, other than like Jack tattooed and an aggressive ability to keep up with me drinking was, you know, other women wanted him and he wanted me. And that's about as far as it got, right? Like I wasn't looking for the love of my life. I was looking for a drinking partner that also happened to appeal to me physically, right? And
Yep.
create jealousy in other women. Like that's really what it, or jealousy in other men. That's what it came down to. Like that's not what I look for today. I'm looking for somebody who's, right with God and living an authentic life. And I have to be doing those things too.
Nice. Are you ready for another question, Shannon? B. The most common symptoms of emotional insecurity are worry, anger, self pity, and depression. These stem from causes which sometimes seem to be within us and at other times come from without. When you entered the program, can you relate to having these symptoms and how useful have the steps been for you at identifying the causes of these? Question
Mhm.
mark.
Sure. I'm going to have you just refresh my memory a little bit. So the first one's worry. So I'm going to hit that one first, and then you're going to tell me what the next one is. I'm
Okay,
going to little
sure. Okay,
little spiel on that. Um,
sure.
Worry. Yes. I was constantly worried of what was gonna happen, right? Or how I was gonna get through something, before. Worry does nothing for me today, right? I have no control over that. However something's going to be is how it's going to be regardless of me. So that acceptance that I have today, living more in faith than fear, game changer. Before, I was always worried or panicked about something, right? How's this gonna go? Or, oh no, what did I do? And how am I gonna get out of this? It was like hungry hippos. Like one thing was popping up, I was getting it down, the next one was, and I was in a constant state of either worry or complete like discare for it. Um, and that's when I was drinking. So, yes, I started to realize how useless worry was by, doing these steps, and when I'm right with my higher power, I don't have to worry, period. What was the next one that you'd said?
Anger, 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 anger.
That's one that I battled for a while. I was very, very angry, um, in my late in my younger years, right? Angry at things that had happened, angry at losses I'd experienced, angry at the way situations were, things within my family too. And when I would be in a relationship or in an argument with somebody, I can be very cutting. I'm very quick witted, I'm on the ball, and I know how to say things in a way in which is going to cause the pain and the damage that I'm seeking out to do. Right. And I will walk away from that feeling great about it. Then the sickness, I'll start to feel that shame after, right? Once I've calmed down. But like, yeah, that I see red, what's the damage some people can do to somebody else physically, I can do mentally and emotionally and verbally to someone. Um,
You
I'm
can't
not.
erase words. You can't erase words.
No, I know because they stick out to me for things that have been said, but you know what? When my back's against the wall, I'll fire it at you and I'll hit you exactly where it hurts, right? I don't do that today, and that has been through a series of change behaviors over the years, right? Also, I don't want to be somebody who causes someone else pain. If you hurt me, I hurting you back doesn't solve anything. You know what I mean? It just means that I'm gonna have to take accountability. I'm gonna have to go and I'm gonna make an amends. When I'm stuck in anger too, I like to start writing. I'll just vent in a note on my phone or pen to paper. I get it all out and I let it go rather than act on that. Does that mean that I never react? No, I do. I'm human, right? But I correct it very quickly.
I love that. And self pity next.
It's weird how self pity works. You can feel like very inspired. very, like, on top of the world, and you have to watch for those extreme highs and lows too, and then suddenly something can shift, and it's like, I'm bottom of the barrel, I'm worried, I'm fearful, I'm, like, discontented, and I'm like, that poor me comes, but it doesn't come in the voice does my voice doesn't say to me, "Oh, Shannon, poor you, you're a victim," right? It comes in like a discontented feeling, a lack of gratitude, a lack of acceptance. And I can get into that spiral, right? And sink really low. And then I'm just looking for any sort of distraction. So yeah, I watch that for sure today because I don't want to fall into that. But I get up every day, accomplishing things. If I'm lying around too much, can get you into that shame spiral or that self-pity hole.
And
Connection.
depression.
Yeah, I battled that most of my life, right? Before using, after using, and throughout it too. Um, and I have a lot of tools for that today, right? Fortunately, lately that hasn't been a catalyst for me. But I know some triggers for it. And what will happen if I don't do certain things, I start to disconnect, I isolate, or I'm not being active, or, you know, I'm putting things off and getting into that slump. Um, Doom scrolling, right? Instagram, stuff like that, that can lead towards my depression. So I try to do things that keep me healthy mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The closer I am to God, the less room for that depression to come in. But it crippled me in my addiction.
Okay, I'm going to run through these. So I had a massive realization doing a little mini meeting with someone the other day, and I learned that enthusiasm becomes anxiety after a certain point. The two are the same thing. And it's like as soon as you cross the threshold, then, and I'm pretty fucking enthusiastic. And I was also, you know, um, robbing myself of presence with anxiety inside my addiction a lot. And I've still had some things that, that I'm definitely fighting acceptance on. And so like to me, worry really is some form between enthusiasm and anxiety, and robs me of that present moment. And the things that I'm really trying to do to bring myself to presence is working on some meditation, you know, um, playing music, doing the things that keep me centered, resting, sleeping enough, these are the things, eating right, trying to not eat the wrong thing right before bed, like that's those are things that take me away from the present moment. And, anger anger is like a tricky little devil because as much as like I see it happening. I see myself wanting to stop it. And given the wrong circumstance, it's like the horse that just breaks the reins. And I have to like go around saying sorry and making amends very shortly after. And, it often is 100% do. Almost all my anger is a lack of acceptance, a lack of acceptance of who you are and how perfect you are in this moment, and me judging that with and throwing out some expectations to take myself away from what this moment really should be, which is perfect in itself, you know? And self pity, like I catch myself all like, this is one that I'm just like, if I could work, if I could have such a transformative thing with my other resentments as I have with self pity, I'm really good at not having a pity party anymore. I really feel that it is like, it is like most achieved award, most improved award goes to Milan for self pity because like where I used to be and where I'm at now is really a whole different thing. And I guess, like giving myself the most improved award, why don't I throw humility on that? No, I'm kidding. That was a joke. But
I love
the
it.
truth is, But the truth is that it is something that I feel like I've had the most success at working inside what I discovered in my step four, and so I look at how like I have a no tolerance. I have a no tolerance policy with that. And yet, the other resentments seem to get like a kind of tolerated till I catch you or till you hurt enough that I've got to change. Um, and depression was something that I don't think I really suffered. Like at the age of 19, I remember this realization. It was like I was not at a positive part of my cycle of up and down. But I remember saying to myself, this is a trough and life does not sit here. And somehow making that realization and having that inner conversation with myself has kept me from dwelling and living inside a depression too much. But at the end of my addiction, when there was so much more negative than positive occurring, I I definitely have to question, like was I just kind of really depressed with the state of everything? And using to hide that and I'll never truly know that, like I think coming out of addiction and into treatment or into recovery or however you manage to do it, I think you got to give yourself some grace of like 6 months to a year to let everything inside your body sort itself out, to be able to actually even see like what is left, after that? What pain is still left here after I've changed my diet, I've started sleeping, started exercising, taken away the drugs? Like when you just kind of like even if you do all that stuff perfectly from day one, I really think you're not going to even start to feel who you really can feel like for 6 to 12 months. If you've been on a run like me and most of the people I know on this podcast, like we weren't casual users, and so we did damage.
No, and
Things
it
take
takes a while to
momentum.
reset those things too.
Yeah,
Like
it
you
does.
you hit that and mean it like right on too. And those, like acute withdrawal syndromes that we
Mhm.
symptoms, sorry, that we experience too, right? Like that can go up sometimes to 2 years in people, right? And you're not gonna undo years or decades for some of us, worth of damage, in 3 months, right? Like, our equilibrium's off, everything needs to reset, how we process emotions, like, we're childlike in a lot of ways too, an emotional teenager, I say sometimes, and others, right? Like, and the depression and the sadness and stuff like that, that's gonna happen. And a
If
lot
you
of that is, still our bodies getting used to it. It's also our disease saying, "Hey, let me, look for little nooks and crannies where I can get back in to pull them back." So, yeah, it's a process and you have to give yourself grace. Have to.
When I stopped speed, it took me almost a year to be able to experience joy again. Like, you can really burn receptors out. And
Serotonin, yeah.
and it takes so long for that to come back. So like, when they say like hang on till the miracle happens, some of that is just healing. And the only way that's even ever going to happen is if you start treating yourself good. Like if you perpetuate, you know, um an amphetamine addiction with a sugar addiction afterwards, you like some of those receptors are just never going to get to heal because you're keeping your adrenal things in just an exhausted state forever
Mhm.
and ever and ever. And, like, don't try to quit everything in one day. Okay. Like, let's just be honest, just start using the steps to gradually increase the health factor in your life. Because I'm telling you, like, until I really started exercising, until I could put the smokes down, like, until a lot of things, there's been a lot of healing that, has occurred even after my entire first year of being sober. And it's still happening today. Like, I'm still seeing things get better inside my brain and inside my body that like it takes a long time to kill ourselves and it can take just as long to heal ourselves, you know and I think that we're naturally self-centered impatient jerks, Like we have to have some kind of grace on the other side too. And and that might be one of the lessons we need is to learn patience and love for ourselves, you know. hmm Do you have
Yeah,
another question, Shannon?
the same that we're gonna show to other people, right? We need to show to
hmm
ourselves,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I think we've gone through quite a bit, but I will ask you one last
Okay.
thing. What
Yeah.
area of your life as a result of your work in step forward do you feel has um seen the most profound change?
Okay. It just it glitched out at the very start of your question.
Sorry.
So can you?
I
No,
was
I
clearing
just.
my throat too. I
Oh,
said, having done the work that you have on your four, right? Which area of your life do you feel has seen the most profound change as a result?
oh my gosh. Okay. Guilt. I did not have one guilt-free day in my entire life due to religion and just the institutions that like the school that I was in and being involved with the religion and that and like I just I could not. I could work a 14-hour day and feel guilty buying a chocolate bar on the way home from work. Like I'd be like, I had such immense guilt about almost every action that I did. And it wasn't until doing this step and doing my step five that I experienced a guilt-free day ever. And so like my wife would have bet $10 million that we don't even have that she is just completely amazed because she doesn't carry guilt. Like she doesn't carry guilt. And so like here we've got this like guilt-free lady and this totally guilty guy. Like very good yin and yang, obviously. Um, but so she could never understand my guilt. But she could see me trapped inside of it. And for her it was kind of perplexing. And but she saw the pain that it caused me and the inner turmoil that it caused me. And to be free from that has been like one of the fabulous gifts of recovery that I could never nobody who doesn't have that kind of guilt can understand it. You know, it's like when somebody has anxiety, and they're having panic attacks. You can't explain that feeling to somebody who never has had it. You know, like somebody who has back pain, trying to tell somebody who's never had back pain what back pain can be like. Like you just, there's certain things you have to experience. And for me, it was guilt, plain and
Mm.
simple. And being much more guilt free in my life has been just one of the most beautiful parts of recovery.
Because it
And yourself?
frees you to be able to, celebrate yourself and, practice that self-love too.
Yeah. Like I'm worth something,
You sure
you know?
are.
Yeah.
Sure are. And you're helping so many people, and that's glorious, you
I
know?
hope so. I hope so.
And worthy too,
Yeah.
that
Yeah. It's that self-worth and that, that I'm not below and
you're not.
undeserving,
You're not.
and so it's I'm really, really so indebted to this program for so many gifts, but that's definitely one for sure. And you?
Similar, self-love, right? I didn't really have that before, right? There'd be moments of, feeling good about myself, but never really loving myself unconditionally, right? And not beating myself up. That freedom has been huge because I lived for so long, being my own worst critic and beating myself up for every single thing I've done, my fault or not, right? And I was blocked off from any sort of love of myself or grace towards myself. And I have those things today. And it's beautiful, right? Like I watch the way I talk to myself because there's no other voice that I'm gonna hear more than my own, right? And if it's filled with negative self-talk, then I'm harder on and we're harder on ourselves and others, right? Or on us. So I watch how I speak to myself, what I say, because I'm gonna build myself up. I like who I am today, I love myself and everything that's come with me, right? It's all been a process and, this is my journey and, you know, it's nowhere near done, right? God willing. So, I have to forgive myself and I have to allow myself to be human and also to be proud of myself when, I'm doing great things. And even when it's not that, but just when I'm, picking myself up when I'm feeling low, right? It's like cheerleader to yourself. And yeah, that's come in the freedom of this program and doing the steps. And it's been really great.
I love that. I love doing these together, Shannon. I want to say I had one of my recovery siblings kind of reach out to me who's been struggling and relapsed, and she happened to turn on our podcast, and it was one of the ones that you were on, and she just really connected with a lot of the things you said, and I wanted to let you know that you made a difference in someone's day out there. And I think that, you make a difference in my day every time we share time. And I'm really grateful. And today was just another fine example of how we can connect and talk about recovery in a way that I can with very few people. And so I have gratitude for that.
Thank you for sharing that with me. That makes it makes it all worth it, right? If you touch one person and you help lighten the load for one person that's struggling, because if it wasn't for, those that came before you and I, right? I wouldn't be where I am today either. So that's wonderful. I am so, so grateful for you. Like every time we do this, I get off the podcast feeling just so like invigorated and full and like a piece. And you're such a beautiful soul. I'm so grateful we met. I'm so grateful for our friendship. I'm grateful to be on this recovery road, alongside you. And I get so much out of what you share, like you're really doing what your calling is to be doing in these podcasts. And yeah, you're just phenomenal, we know, right?
Yep.
Everyone who went to treatment was not everybody's where we are, right? So,
Yep.
it's a miracle, but it's a testament to doing the work, and facing the stuff
Absolutely.
not easy.
Well, I love you tons, and I look forward to
I
spending
love you
some time
too.
next week on step 5. And guess what, everybody? Tune in next week for more recovery fun. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Love you so
Please
much.
help us help
Love
others. If you like what you've seen here today, please subscribe and share this podcast and help us get to 100 followers. We're looking for interaction with our audience. So please email recoveryfreedomrising@gmail.com or contact Milan South Okanagan Starcic on Facebook with questions, topic suggestions, or just comments. We'd love to hear from you.